It started with a map that shouldn't have existed. Dr. Eleanor Price, an anthropologist from Knoxville, had been cataloging early Appalachian settlements when she found it folded inside an 1890 land registry. The paper was thin as moth wings, the ink brown with age. It showed the familiar ridges of the Blue Ridge Mountains, but there was a small circle drawn in red, where no town appeared on any modern chart. Beside it, in careful script, a single word: Hollowell. The name didn't appear in census lists, church rolls, or post routes. No Hollowell had paid tax, registered birth, or claimed property in over a century. Yet, the handwriting on that map looked new or almost fresh, as if someone had traced it recently. Curiosity has a sound, and for Eleanor it was the whisper of paper against her fingers. She spent nights combing through state archives, tracing references that seemed to dissolve as soon as she found them. An 1891 article in a defunct newspaper mentioned a communal tragedy near the Virginia border. A 1920 memo from the Forestry Service warned that entry to the basin formerly known as Hollowell Hollow remains restricted due to biological hazard. When she asked what kind of hazard, no one could answer. One archivist told her, almost apologetically, that the records from that district had been cleansed during a federal reorganization in the 1950s. That word stuck to her. Cleansed. She left for the mountains at dawn on a gray September morning. The locals at the gas station stared when she asked about the hot. One of them, an old man with cloudy eyes, said quietly, "Best to let that ground sleep, Miss." They didn't take kindly to strangers when they were alive, and they sure won't now. The road into the hills twisted until it stopped pretending to be a road. Her tires crunched over gravel, then mud. The forest closed around her, dense with hemlock and pine. Somewhere far above, thunder rolled like slow breath at the coordinates marked on the map. She found the remnants of a trail. Half-buried stones lined the path, each carved with a single mark, an H, inside a circle. The symbol repeated every 20 feet, guiding her deeper, as if the mountain itself remembered the way. After 3 hours of climbing, she reached the ridge. From there, the land fell away into a bowl-shaped hollow veiled in fog. She could smell the iron temps of wet earth before she saw the ruins, outlines of cabins, stone chimneys, a collapsed meeting hall overtaken by vines. The silence was total. No wind, no insects. Even the rain seemed to hush as it fell. Eleanor unpacked her recorder, noting the layout in steady, professional tones. Evidence of late 19th century settlement. Likely subsistence farmers. But her voice sounded smaller than she expected, swallowed by the mist. She found the first clue inside the meeting hall. Beneath the broken floorboards lay a series of etchings, cut into the foundation stones, spirals, interlocking circles, and that same H symbol repeated again and again. In the center was a phrase she didn't recognize, scratched in rough phonetic script: "Our flesh for the hollow." She brushed her fingers across the words and felt the stone pulse once, faintly, like a heartbeat. She told herself it was thunder. Deeper in the hollow she discovered a bell tower leaning at an impossible angle, its bell long gone. The ground below it was soft, disturbed, as though something large had been buried and recently unearthed. Her recorder caught a sound she didn't hear, until later 3 faint knocks, evenly spaced, echoing from somewhere underground. As dusk fell, she set up camp near the ridge. The forest was too quiet. The wind carried fragments of voices that didn't belong to any direction. When she replayed her day's notes, the last 30 seconds of tape were missing, replaced by a whispering that resembled her own voice saying, "You came back." She barely slept. At dawn she found fresh footprints circling her tent bare, narrow, and deep in the mud. They led downhill toward the hollow, vanishing where the fog thickened into a white wall. That's where she found the entrance, a door of rusted iron set into the hillside, half hidden by ferns. The hinges were fused with age, but the lock was clean, recently broken. On the door someone had painted, in black, tar-like streaks. The same mark from the Stone's Age within a circle, but this time, the circle had been crossed through. Her journal entry ended there. The last recording captured her breathing fast, the click of a lantern being lit, and a whisper behind her voice saying, "They kept the hunger." 2 days later, a ranger found her car still parked at the trailhead, keys in the ignition, doors locked from the inside. Only one item lay on the passenger seat, the map, now damp and torn, the red circles smeared into a spiral. The search team arrived 3 days after Eleanor's disappearance. Officially, they were Forestry Service personnel, responding to an abandoned vehicle. Unofficially, one of them, David Klein, was there because of her. He had worked with Eleanor on an environmental survey years before, and when her name appeared in a missing persons report beside the word Hollowell, something in him went cold. The road to the ridge was half erased by the rain. Their convoy crawled up the incline until the tires found no traction, and they continued on foot. The air grew thick, metallic, as if the mountain exhaled rust at the clearing. They found Eleanor's campsite still intact, tent unzipped, bedroll undisturbed, recorder lying half buried in mud. When Klein played the tape, it was blank except for one brief fragment, her voice saying, "The door was never meant to open." No one spoke after that. They followed the trail downhill. Even in daylight, the hollows seemed to swallow sound. The map Eleanor had left in her car matched the terrain perfectly until it didn't. Paths shifted. Markers vanished, the geometry of the land subtly wrong. What should have been a straight walk of half a mile stretched into hours. At last they saw the door. It sat in the hillside like a wound, iron eaten by rust but still humming faintly, as though catching echoes from underground. Around it, the trees had grown in unnatural spirals, trunks twisting toward the center, as if reaching for warmth. Klein knelt, brushing away moss from the threshold. There were words etched into the metal beneath the corrosion, barely legible under the film of years. "Our kin, our keeper." He pressed his ear to the door. Beneath the wind he heard a slow, rhythmic sound, not movement, exactly, but something vast and patient, breathing deep within the stone. They pried the latch open. The hinges shrieked once. An air older than memory spilled out, cold enough to sting the lungs. Inside stretched a tunnel lined with timbers blackened by age. Lantern light caught markings carved into the beams, symbols repeating down the corridor, spirals, circles, and the same cross through Eleanor had seen. Every 50 feet stood an alcove with a clay vessel resting in it. Each pot was sealed with wax and rope, its surface painted with soot. One of the younger agents, Torres, reached out to touch one. The wax cracked at his fingertips, and the air filled with a dry hiss like sand shifting. He jerked back, eyes wide. "It's breathing," he whispered. Klein didn't answer. He was staring farther down the tunnel, where the walls began to widen into a chamber. The chamber's ceiling disappeared into shadow. The floor was covered in old wooden planks, arranged in a pattern, radiating lines converging on a stone pillar at the center. Runes spiraled up its surface, too intricate for any Appalachian dialect. Pinned to the pillar by a rusted nail was a journal page, brittle with age. Klein pulled it free and read by the lantern's glow. "The hollow demands remembrance. To forget is to starve it. We keep the ritual. We keep the hollow fed. Our voices are its breath. Our silence is its sleep." Torres whispered, "What does that mean?" Klein looked at the pattern on the floor. "It means this place isn't abandoned. It's waiting." They set up temporary lighting, photographing everything. The deeper they recorded, the more they realized the structure was enormous, too complex for a simple cellar. It felt grown rather than built, its tunnels curling like the roots of a tree. At one point, the team's equipment flickered. Radios failed, batteries drained. The light dimmed to an amber pulse, and for a moment Klein thought he heard voices, whispering his own name from every direction at once. Then Torres screamed. They found him at the edge of the chamber, staring at the wall. Dozens of handprints covered the stone small. Pale impressions pressed into the surface as though from the inside. The marks were fresh. Klein steadied him, forcing the younger man to breathe. "We're leaving," he said. But as they turned, the tunnel behind them no longer looked the same. The floor dipped, walls twisting inward. The mountain itself seemed to have shifted while they were watching. By the time they emerged into daylight, the door had already begun to close on its own, the hinges groaning like something reluctant to let them go. At the base of the ridge, Klein made one final note in his field book. Hollowell was not a town. It was a covenant. The people here bound themselves to something beneath the mountain, a voice, a hunger, a promise. The curse is not death. It is remembrance. When they reached the vehicles, every compass needle pointed toward the hollow dot asterisk. Asterisk. The Hollowell file was sealed again, within a week. The Forestry Service issued a statement saying the team had found unstable terrain and evidence of toxic gas pockets. No mention of Eleanor. No mention of the chamber. Within months, the road leading up to the ridge was paved over and renamed. The coordinates quietly altered in public databases. But Klein didn't let it go. He couldn't. He took the journal page and a copy of Eleanor's recordings home with him, convinced that if he could translate the writing, he would understand what the Hollowells had worshipped or feared. Night after night he played the tape, slowed the audio, magnified the frequencies. The whispering behind Eleanor's voice began to take shape, forming patterns that mimicked breathing. He noticed something else. Each time he played the file, the house seemed to settle around him. Pipes groaned. Floorboards popped. Once, in the reflection of his window, he thought he saw the shape of a door behind him. Sleep came rarely. When it did, he dreamed of standing in the hollow, the air heavy and wet. A hum rising from beneath the soil, like the tuning of a vast instrument. The earth would open just enough to whisper, "Our kin, our keeper." He always woke before he could answer. Months passed. Then the calls started. People from nearby towns reported low vibrations under their homes. Their dogs refusing to enter the woods. Strange symbols appearing on fence posts and inside a circle. No one knew what it meant. The county blamed vandals. Klein drove out to the ridge again in early spring. The road was gone, replaced by new growth, but the forest remembered him. It guided him without signposts. At dusk, he reached the clearing where Eleanor's tent had been. A single lantern hung from a branch, swaying gently though there was no wind. He switched on his recorder. Field log. "I don't know who'll hear this. The hollow is expanding. Not physically. Through us. Through memory." The air thickened around him. The ground trembled with that same patient rhythm he'd heard months before. He felt it behind his ribs now, in his pulse. He whispered, "If remembrance feeds it, what happens when everyone forgets?" The mountain answered not with a sound, but with silence so complete it erased every other thought. The tape hissed, then cut out. The next day, hikers found his vehicle parked at the base of the ridge. Inside was his notebook, open to the last entry. "It doesn't need blood. It needs witnesses." No one ever found his body. The coordinates of the hollow were erased again, absorbed into government mapping software as blank terrain. But even now, hikers say their GPS falters near that stretch of the Appalachians. The compass spins. The wind grows still, and sometimes, when they play back their videos, a low whisper hums beneath the sound for words repeated again and again. "Our kin, our keeper." No one knows who says it. Maybe it's the hollow. Maybe it's the mountain itself. Or maybe it's us each time we tell their story, keeping the hunger alive through our remembering. Asterisk if you've stayed with this story to the end. Remember, what vanishes from maps doesn't always vanish from memory. The Hollowell name has been erased from every registry, but the land where they lived is still there. People drive past it every day, never knowing what sleeps below the soil, or what listens when they say the word hollow. If you felt the air change while you listened, if the silence around you suddenly grew heavier, don't worry. That's just the way old stories breathe. They wake up for a little while when someone remembers them. Share this episode with someone who still believes every legend begins with a truth. Follow for more forgotten histories, more sealed files, more places where the road simply ends. And until next time, keep your compass close, your light steady, and never follow the sound that knows your name.